Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of, a virtual meeting of the Young Onset Alzheimer's Support Group meeting. And we're very pleased that you've been able to join us this afternoon, as well as our guests and the people who are going to make an input to the session this afternoon. So far, the meetings that we've had have concentrated possibly on some of the more problematic aspects of having a diagnosis of young onset Alzheimer's. And we've looked at problems around family and about work and the implications for work and so on and so forth. But this afternoon, we're going to switch things a little bit, and we're going to look at some of the opportunities and some of the possibilities that sometimes emerge, particularly in the early stages of life after a dementia diagnosis. And we've got a number of people who are going to talk to us this afternoon who represent a significant number of organisations who are involved in developing really interesting and positive activities and ways for people to be involved, both those with a diagnosis and their supporters and family carers and so on. So I'm delighted to welcome this afternoon Caroline Welsh, who comes here representing Music for Life at the Wigmore Hall, Dave Daniel, who's going to talk about his particularly interesting experience in the sporting sphere, and then Roberta Mazur, who's going to talk both about her own personal experience of supporting her father who was living with dementia, and also her current role at Arts for Dementia. So we've got a lot on this afternoon, and I hope it's going to be an enjoyable and interesting session for you. But before we begin that, I'm just going to hand over to Nikki Zimmermann, who's going to talk to us a little bit about a couple of research projects that are on that we would really like your engagement with. So, Nikki.
Thanks, Jackie. I think it's lovely to be here with you. So I just want to go through a couple of the research projects that we are currently looking to hopefully have some participation from you lovely people with. So first of all is an online focus group for the speech and language therapy. So this is looking at sort of communication with people with young onset Alzheimer's disease. And Lily Heighton, who's a master's student studying at UCL with speech and language therapy, her project within the Rare Dementia Impact Study is researching the problems that people are encountering. So she's inviting people that are either living with young onset Alzheimer's disease diagnosis or their caregivers to be part of this online focus group that she's setting up. It's going to be supervised by Dr. Anna Volkmer, who is a speech and language therapist, and Dr. Chris Hardy, and Chris is involved in the PPA support group. The focus groups will take place on the 7th and 10th of March, so not long, so in the next couple of weeks. And we would like to invite you to come along, and if you'd be interested, we will put the research at raredementia.support.org information up on the screen later, or we'll put it in the for everybody to see. We're also looking to invite people to talk about their experience. So this is with the member of the research team talking about the experience of living alongside somebody with a rare dementia. And this is in a question form. So it could be a small sort of set of questions, 1 to 10 questions with short answers, or it could be more open-ended questions. And these conversations could be on a one-to-one basis or with a friend supporting you. So again, if you're interested in this, it's the research at raredementia.support.org, which we will follow up with. Another one of our projects that we're doing at the moment is a rerun of the very successful late stage carers program, which we ran for the last couple of years. It's going to be delivered over 8 weeks, and Claire Waddington is the main facilitator here, but she's joined with a real diverse panel of experts coming along at different weeks. There'll be different topics that we'll be looking into, such as sensory stimulation, diets and swallowing, legal sessions, care in home and care homes, palliative care, pain management. So lots of expert input into these, and it is particularly for people caring for people at a later stage. So if you're interested in this, they will be starting on the 8th of March. So if you could contact us soon, that would be great. And you can contact us on our normal email address, which is contact@raredementiasupport.org. And then just finally, just a reminder about our peer support groups. So we have peer support groups for people living with a diagnosis of young onset Alzheimer's disease. And this is a friendly social online group which meets every month on a Wednesday morning at 11 o'clock for an hour and a half. And then we have a carers peer support group, so people caring for a loved one living with young onset Alzheimer's disease. And this is on the last Wednesday of every month on Zoom at 2 o'clock. So if you would be interested in joining any of those, again, you can get in touch with us at the contact@raredementiasupport.org email. And that's all from me. Jacquie, I'll just hand back to you briefly.
Thanks very much, Nikki. That's great, very interesting. I do encourage anybody who can to join in those projects, because they're going to provide very interesting feedback for researchers and the project team in terms of the experience, the lived experience. I'm going to hand over now to our chair, Dr. Cath Mummery, and this is always a very important and intriguing aspect of our sessions. Cath's going to update us on progress on the research projects that she's leading and involved in.
Thank you, Jacquie. Thank you so much. And hello, everybody. It's lovely to be here on a sunny Friday afternoon. I'm just going to share my screen, so bear with me. I last gave an update at the last webinar, which was in October. So that's only 4 months. So some things will be similar. Forgive me, those of you who have heard some of this before, but hopefully going over it again is still interesting. There are some changes and some developments, some of which are very exciting, I think. So please, 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 if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A. And if I haven't got time in this session, I will answer them afterwards, I promise. But I just want to give you a sort of skip through what's happening in treatment trials in Alzheimer's disease that's relevant to young onset Alzheimer's disease. So we know that there are different types of drugs currently being trialed in Alzheimer's disease against different targets. And that, when I say targets, I mean the different elements of pathology that make up the disease. So one that you will all have heard of is amyloid, which is the earliest and probably the triggering event, deposition of amyloid in plaques in the brain. So option one in treatment is trying to target that amyloid and remove it so that it cannot cause the damage. And the dominant approach to that has been something known as passive immunotherapy. What that means is giving a ready-made antibody in an injection form to an individual so that it attaches to those different types of amyloid that you can see over here and removes them from the brain or from the circulation. And there are a number of drugs that have been investigated over the years to do that. And some of them have fallen by the wayside, those that are struck out in red. But there are 4 drugs that are still showing promise, that are in late phase studies, so big international studies, and even one, which I'm about to mention, that's actually had a degree of approval. So going through these drugs, aducanumab, you will probably all have heard, or at least seen it in one of these many newspaper stories. There's been a huge controversy, an ongoing controversy about this drug. This is the first disease-modifying drug that has been approved in Alzheimer's disease. So that's a massive statement. But there has been significant controversy about how effective it actually is, or whether there is evidence enough to say it's effective. That discussion is ongoing. Interestingly, although the US authority approved it for accelerated approval, the European authority has not followed suit. And so there are ongoing discussions and appeals throughout the world as to what will happen with this drug. Just to give you a bit more of what the evidence is behind it, there are 2 large phase 3 trials, Emerge and Engage, and these are late phase studies that look to see how effective that drug is in cognitive change as well as biological change. One of those studies met its primary and secondary cognitive endpoints. That means it showed a significant change in the rate of cognitive and functional decline in individuals. The other study was negative across the same endpoint. When they looked at the biological effect of that drug, in both studies, it showed a massive reduction in amyloid in the brains using PET scans. So in both studies, it took out the amyloid as it was supposed to. And associated with that, there was some evidence that it showed a downstream effect in the pathology. And that effectively suggests there is disease modification, which is what we all talk about all the time. We want to modify the course of a disease to slow it. There's more ongoing studies with this drug to work out what's going on, why there's a disparity. And there's ongoing discussion about how it might be used in the future, given it has actually got approval in at least one country. What's interesting is that there is now increasing consistency in other drugs that work in the same way, that are antibodies against amyloid. 3 drugs, lecanemab, gantenerumab, and donanemab, have all shown if you give enough of them, they reduce amyloid in the brain. That shows downstream changes in degeneration, so it modifies disease. And in turn, there is some evidence, though modest, that that changes cognitive decline. So this is really promising and more evidence than we've had before. And there's ongoing work in both sporadic Alzheimer's disease and in genetic Alzheimer's disease. But 2 of these drugs have filed for the same approval that aducanumab got. So we may have several drugs that are vying for the same position in coming years. Of course, if you give drugs like this, we have to make sure they're safe. And what are the side effects? And the commonest side effect with these antibodies is something known as focal brain swelling or brain edema, which you can see in this scan here that there's a little white patch that gradually increases and then resolves. It looks quite dramatic, but actually it's usually asymptomatic. It resolves spontaneously. It's dose related. If you titrate the dose, it decreases. And it mostly happens at the beginning of giving these drugs. So we know a lot about it. We know that there's an increased risk in certain individuals, and we need to make sure that we monitor that, we understand it, and if we get these to the clinical situations, that we manage it appropriately. So there is evidence of amyloid removal, downstream impact, and some cognitive change, but that is modest. So we probably need to think about giving combination treatments, not just this one, or giving this very early on. So if we gave combination treatments, what is the second option that we might give with it? The second protein in Alzheimer's disease that builds up, as you know, is tau. You get tau tangles as well as amyloid plaques. So can we reduce the accumulation of tau and therefore prevent the spreading of tau, which we think is the thing that induces toxicity of amyloid? And there are a number of methods that are being used. So active vaccination against tau, like being vaccinated against COVID, you get a vaccine and then boosters to prevent the tau building up. 2 drugs are being studied, and the furthest evolved is ADVAC1. So far, in a phase 2 study in around 100 people, it was safe, and it showed a really strong antibody response, as you can see here. 98% of people got a really strong, sustained antibody response, which is what you want body to do with these vaccines. In that study, it showed a slowing in a marker of degeneration, which is encouraging. It showed some evidence that it was decreasing tau in the spinal fluid, but it did not show changes on cognitive outcome. And this comes back to study design. We still are not perfect at this. Some of the people put in the study, it turned out, didn't have Alzheimer's disease, so it's unsurprising that it didn't work on all of them. We also are using passive immunotherapy, that method I talked about against amyloid, against tau. And this drug is an example, Zimmermann. So the aim is, this is an antibody that you give to people that enters the CNS. It mops up the tau as it is spreading between the cells and prevents it seeding and spreading and accelerating disease. We know that it's been safe so far in early phase studies. Disappointingly, one study read out last year as negative in mild Alzheimer's disease, but one has shown some suggestion that it did show a change on cognitive outcome, and we'll get further information in the summer on that, which I'll be able to share with you. But are there other ways of mopping up or changing tau rather than mopping it up once it's been produced? Can we decrease production in the first place? And there are exciting methods like gene silencing, which do exactly that. So this diagram shows you the gene on the left, which is, against in this case, it produces the protein tau. It is transcribed into a message, that's the messenger RNA, which is usually then translated to produce that protein tau. If we produce a synthetic form of that message that binds to it, it will destroy it and prevent that production. And that's the method that is used with this drug that we've now been studying for several years, and we've now completed the first study on this drug. This is a drug that has to be given intrathecally, in other words, by a lumbar puncture. But people found this actually very safe and tolerable and continued through the study for 2 years. So lumbar punctures are not as awful as people think they are. We also looked at whether this drug actually changed the course of tau and whether it reduced it as we hoped it would. And these are the results, which I'm really excited to show you because it did exactly what we hoped it would do. And it did it in a dose-responsive way, which is very exciting. It's the first time that's been seen with any drug against tau, this reduction in the levels of tau in the spinal fluid. So this will go into phase 2, which will be coming soon, and we'll be recruiting into that in the summer. And finally, inflammation is the third part of that disease process in Alzheimer's disease. So if we can modulate that, again, we might be able to modulate the course of the disease. And there are 2 studies that I want to tell you about very briefly. This one, Electra-002, uses again an antibody that is given to the person in an infusion and aims to enhance function of gene known as TREM2, which is involved in inflammation and the inflammatory response. So far, we know it's safe, but we await results of how effective it is. There are 2 studies coming soon that I want you to know about because one is specific to young onset Alzheimer's disease, and this is going to be another gene silencing treatment, but against amyloid production or tau production, and we will be opening that in the next few months. And there's another anti-inflammatory where we are giving again an antibody, but this time it enhances the immune response and aims to block the aging problems within our immune response. And again, it will be recruiting in the coming months. So there's a lot going on, more evidence in amyloid than in the others as yet, but promise in the anti-tau treatments, and inflammation is showing increasing interest. And finally, I just want to say thank you to the team, and that of course includes participants and their members and families that give so much time to these studies. I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Cath. It's always really, really interesting to get that expert and in-depth analysis of what's going on. And, you know, we do understand and appreciate so much what a difficult field it is that you're working in. And it's really exciting to hear about some of the progress that's being made. Tiny steps maybe, but it looks as though it's leading in positive directions. Right, now we're going to move on to the theme of this afternoon and activities and so on. And we've got 3 topics that we're going to pick up on. The first one is musically based, and many people in the living with Alzheimer's are aware of things like the Alzheimer's Society singing for the brain and so on. However, there's an enormous range of other exciting and interesting activities involving music. And so I'm going to turn now to introduce Caroline, who represents Music for Life and is going to talk to us about the work that she's leading based at the Wigmore Hall. So welcome, Caroline. We look forward to hearing about your work and what you're doing. Thank you.
Hello and welcome. My name is Hermione and I'm joined today by Caroline, and together we're going to be talking about a project we've been working on together called Out of the Ordinary. I wonder, Caroline, if you'd like to start by saying a bit about who's involved and then explaining what Out of the Ordinary is.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you, Hermione. So we are from Wigmore Hall Learning, and we're the kind of creative leaders, I guess, of the project under the Music for Life programme at Wigmore Hall. And it's a three-way partnership, this project, with the Royal Academy of Music and with Rare Dementia Support Group. But that's the short answer of where the people involved come from in terms of their groups. But I guess the way that the project feels is that it's a community of people who have decided to join and travel a bit of the way in this process of sharing things we've noticed, and that whether that might be somebody who's been part of the project for several series for a single session. So the musicians from the Academy sometimes have visited us just for one session in a series. And then whether people come to every session or every series, or if they drop in and out according to what's practical, and in the most everyday sense, whatever might be going on in their lives. So about the project, I think the seeds of it were sown for me at the start of the original lockdown, when I noticed what sorts of things were necessary for me to sustain my own sense of wellness during that time, what was needed to connect. And even before I started to deliberately seek to connect with people, I noticed that these small little interactions in my park, a word with somebody about the weather, the sense that a particular tree is looking just a smidgen closer to being in blossom than it was yesterday, those small things made a huge, big difference to me. They really lit up something much bigger in me. And I wondered if that was something that could be interesting to other people too, whether that might be something that other people would share. Those small, loving acts of attention where you notice something very tiny and it kind of brings a sense of connectedness to all living things. It helps you to emphasize the way that you are alive, to realize that you are, and how much of that overlaps with all other living things. So the project grew out of that as an online event, and it continues to be that, which means that people can take part from anywhere in the world. And we've had some dropping in and out in transit as well from some people who've just sort of poked their head up to say hello and then taken away some of the ideas between the sessions. So the sessions themselves are a series that happen every fortnight. They're the tip of an iceberg of experience, or they're the kind of starting spring of a wellspring or a waterfall of ideas, maybe. So the sessions themselves look like we come together, we share our ideas and focus our thinking about a certain theme. We may share some images, we might share photographs that we have. We may, in the actual windows of the screen, we might choose to share objects that we have in our hands or in our houses, and we'll bring them to each other to see something that made you stop in your tracks, something that made you wonder at something that you recalled when going about your daily life, that reminded you of a person in the group or something that they'd said or the way that they looked, their energy. So all of those things would come together and be shared. And actually, in the last series, in the autumn, somebody shared a poem that expresses that much better than I could, by Mary Oliver, and the poem's called Swan. And it's shot through with questions of, did you see that too? Did you also share my wonderment at this sort of miracle of flight? Did you notice all this incredible beauty in the everyday and think that it changed everything to be aware of it? So I suppose that's the intention of the project. And the sessions themselves vary according to who's in them. They could be full of banter, they might be full of laughter, we might join each other in sort of teasing, or we may be moved together to tears in something that somebody has shared. And that process of bringing the things together, I think, is the beauty of it. You hear somebody else's words and you respond to them, and that dignifies the experience for them. So imagine if those were your words. But we wanted to give you a flavour of what the project feels like. So we're going to share a little piece of work that we made in the last series. So if I hand over to you, Hermione, whilst I get organised to share that screen.
Yes, it's always so lovely kind of being able to talk about the project and try to convey the flavour of what it is that we do in the sessions. And I think one of the things is so nourishing to be able to hear something that resonates with you. And I think that's the thing about the poems that were shared, and this idea that someone could have written something a very long time ago and it's still just as valid now. And we created a poem. We often create poems together, and I find that often we share things in a very poetic way, whether it's a comment in an email or a remark after someone's improvised a piece. So often in the sessions I will write down what people are saying as they're saying them, and then we kind of create this tapestry together, taking care of each other's offerings. And then this one, someone from the group recited the poem whilst the musicians improvised. So it's kind of, it encapsulates many different elements that feature at various points in the sessions.
A day in the life of oneself. Nothing stays the same. Constant soul, ancient presence, an eternal moment. Blessing of the beck, it flows. It flows in different ways, but it flows. It alters with its own experience of the weather. The Old Norse, the pull, the weathering, the link between the rock, water and the rock, sharing the same feeling. Depth and shallowness, a pilgrimage representing life. Not quite what it seems, trusting that it is, without really knowing. Capturing a moment of ancient presence, like a day in the life of oneself.
I see something different in that every single time. I don't know about you, Caroline. It's so lovely to see it again, but it's kind of whatever seems most present for you in your life. It's like there's something in there. There's like a line in there that is almost like I've never heard it, but I actually typed it in there.
It's that feeling of them being, the lines are full of the people who said them, you know, and the ideas overlap. That happened to us so often, you know. Occasionally somebody would mention last autumn we were looking at texture, paying attention to the rough with the smooth. So that was filtering what we saw and how we shared our ideas. And sometimes people would share something that they had noticed and be sorry that they hadn't taken a photograph of it to share it, only to find that somebody else in another country even had shared a photograph that could have been meant to go with those words. And that process of the overlapping of ideas, I think, is critical to us. We loved the idea of the name being out of the ordinary, because it seemed to me that in those small everyday things that you notice in your life, at your kitchen table, looking out of your window, seeing into your garden, knowing your neighbourhood, that those things might kind of contain within them seeds of all that's meaningful about life in general. But I could wax on for ages about it, I'm sure. But so we wanted to share some of the ideas that other people had sent in. And I've got an email that came from one of the participants between the sessions that expressed some of what had happened in the session before, and a feeling of connectedness out of time, really, to a different place, to a memory she had from a long time ago. And maybe connected to a sense of traveling. I know somebody was very keen on the idea of traveling and not even sure whether he would be able to do the traveling that he liked, but talking about those ideas and sharing some of the ideas somehow brought it to life, even in imagination, in the feeling of it, I guess, and the noticing that other people shared that with you. So I'm just going to read a little excerpt that came from one of our emails, if that's okay. Our participants wrote this. Thank you so much for the composition you improvised for us about the beck. Not only did it portray oak beck so well, but it took me back to my childhood visits to my grandfather's farm on the edge of the Moors in the North Pennines. On a warm day, I would sometimes lie in the rough pasture alongside a spring where the water bubbled out over the stones and I could hear the sound of the curlews and lapwings calling overhead. Magical. It's got this sense of sharedness, I think, which really is at the heart of it. Togetherness, being able to be together. Somebody described our music making in one of the sessions last series, about as being like a conversation between friends who hadn't seen each other for a long time. And sometimes the ideas that spring up in the session plant little seeds that grow in all kinds of ways that we might not imagine they would. For example, one of the musicians involved in a project last year, in the springtime last year, she spoke about how unlikely it was to feel so connected to people that you'd never met before, that you didn't know, that how we had set out to find something that we'd look in a similar way, and we would find something to connect each other, and we always did. She made a beautiful piece of work, which I have the actual piece of the work here. This was a musician, and look, it's right in bright sunshine. I don't know if you can see that well. This is a literal weaving in to this beautiful artwork some of the ideas from the project. This is from a drawing that somebody made of seaweed, an experiment, an exploration, a sort of process of looking at things that you might not have noticed well before, or that you maybe never thought that you might do before. So we close our little segment with the framing music that we use at the end of each of our live sessions, as a way of drawing to a close today's experiments together and sending everybody out into the week, into the fortnight, into the day, with a new energy, perhaps. So I'm going to get organised to share the framing music again. It now has, maybe you want to say about that, about it, Hermione.
Well, I mean, I think what I love about the closing music is it has a different energy always, because there's a sense of an ending being the new beginning. And then there's this sort of anticipation of what will come from each person, where they will take it. So I think now it's really an invitation for you to listen in whatever way feels right for you in this moment, and maybe some words will come to mind. Maybe you'll be drawn to look at your room or look out of your window, or close your eyes and just listen to the music. And I think that's kind of the way you want to take the offering, the way you want to take it forward, knowing that whatever you were to come back with would be accepted and celebrated and taken on. So I hope you enjoy our closing music today.
Thank you very much, Caroline and Hermione. That was absolutely lovely, and just a lovely, relaxing interview during this afternoon session. And we're delighted that Caroline's with us this afternoon. And if you've got questions and you would like to ask her about the project, there's going to be an opportunity at the end. One thing that I think is lovely about that is the way in which Music for Life was able to adapt to the circumstances of the pandemic, so that the project was able to continue, though in a very different format from what it was doing before. And now we move on to something completely different. This isn't all about art. We understand that people have got a huge range of interests, and we always like to hear the voices of our members during these sessions. And so I'm going to hand over now to Nikki and Dave, who had a conversation earlier this week about how he picked up an interest in a particular sporting activity. So over to you, Dave and Nikki. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Lovely to be here with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Always good to have a chat on it.
We're here this afternoon at the YOAD support webinar, and I'm really lucky to have Dave with me. Dave has been coming to the YOAD peer support group over the last few months, and I thought it'd be really lovely for him to come along today to tell everybody about the activity that he's been involved in. So to start off with, Dave, can you tell us a little bit about how the impact of your diagnosis has on your everyday life?
Yeah, I mean, without going through the entire history, which would be incredibly boring, I sort of left. I was a fraud manager at a large insurance company, and I'd spent 21 years there and was looking forward to the big 25th anniversary in a few years' time, and all that came with that. And I'd not really had that much outside of work. I'd played cricket occasionally and stuff. And sort of when I was diagnosed, it coincided with being given notice that I was going to be made redundant. It was between myself and a colleague, so we did the same job. And it was a no-brainer. Yeah, I knew I had the diagnosis, and I managed to get my get that information across to HR and said, you know, I know that I've been given notice, but I've just had this diagnosis. You need to do something about it. Promptly went off on my way, and thankfully, thanks to some wonderful doctors, I got my redundancy changed to medical retirement. And at that point, I can't remember where the question was going.
That's fine. Do you want to talk a little bit about how it affects you daily? So sort of your memory and sort of organising things.
Yeah. The impact on sort of my daily life is really just causing chaos. I can set out with every good intention that I'm going to do X job. If that X job is one thing, there's a reasonable chance I'm going to do it. If it's 2 or 3 things, then it is absolutely potluck as to whether they'll all get done, none will get done. And then if it's a particularly complex thing, where it means I've got to put, say, something in this room, something in that room, I might do a bit of that, and there's every chance that what I put where I think it should be, I'll be asked the question a few hours later is, so where exactly have you put that? At which point I can't remember any of the options because I've stuck it where I thought it ought to go, and now we'll find it excuse me, at some point in the next few days probably.
So an interesting household you live in then, and a very patient wife.
Yeah, she's brilliant. Excuse me. She's still working. But over the course of 5 years, you work out ways of doing things, don't you? Yeah. And she's brilliant. She's she's figured out and changed things gradually over time. So obviously when I was first diagnosed, you know, there were some obvious things that I was getting wrong, but we can manage it quite easily. And then as things have gradually got a little bit worse, you know, it's what do we do to make sure that, you know, you've got 5 things that have to be done, maybe 4 or 5 that would be good to be done. How do we get the 5 in place so that when Rach comes home from work, that she can be fairly confident that will be done? And we've been through, you know, various versions of it. And at the moment, I've got a big A4 diary, and at the moment it's working fairly well that we write a list in there on the day, because that means I've got some connection with reality, that I actually know what day of the week it is and what month it is. But I can go through and I'm in the habit of, I've crossed through what I've done, so that when Rach comes in on an evening, she can see and be fairly confident that I've done those things. So touch wood, that's working reasonably well, but it's always having to be adjusted as my memory gets worse. So, but yeah, it's not too bad.
Sounds like a really good procedure you've got in place there. Fantastic. So we're going to talk a little bit today about your interest and your hobby. And I know from our conversations before that you play table tennis. Can you tell us a little bit about your enjoyment for table tennis and when this started?
Yeah, it's almost a passion, I would say these days. If I was fit enough for it to be a passion, that is. So my history with it goes back to, I think I was 13. When I started at a youth club, my eldest brother was already there and went down and they played table tennis. So I started playing, and I think I was probably about 17. So we've been down a few years, and I was playing, there was a youth league, and I played in that with my brother, and we thought we were pretty good. We were sort of top quarter of in the table sort of thing. And as you do, you think you're fantastic. And then out of the blue, my dad announced he was going to come down and play, and we both knew he used to play at work. Didn't think anything of it at all. So he came down and he played my brother first, being the eldest, and he hadn't played for a while, he said, and literally he just demolished him. You know, absolutely thrashed him. So I got up to my go thinking, well, I'll do better than that. And I was on a different table. I didn't know what to do. And it was only after my dad died and I saw some stuff that I discovered a table tennis form in his stuff. And it was an official table tennis rankings paper. And he was ranked in the top 400 in the country in the 1960s. It's like, oh, okay, that probably explains why, even after a long gap, he was still infinitely better than we ever would be. So, you know, that was just, you know, the perfect kick for any. You know, I've played all sports most of my life, and to have that sort of impetus that, you know, your dad was great. So when I was after my diagnosis and table tennis became an option during the day, it was just perfect. I play with old ears, and if they ever see this, they'll slap me for it. It's a Monday morning club, and they are the fittest, funniest, most enjoyable group to be with, because they've all played for a long time. There's mixed talent. You know, there's a couple of guys who have played to a good standard, but I was welcomed without any sort of question. You know, no question like you don't look old enough to be retired. It was just like, can we have a game? And like, we stop halfway through for a coffee and a chat. It sounds like my idea of a perfect morning, really. Yeah, I've been there 5 years, and you know, the majority of us are still all there, and we get new people pop in and out, and you know, it's just a lovely social environment which I feel comfortable in, you know, which is perfect.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. And it's so lovely that it's been so inclusive for you, you know, that you haven't had sort of any barriers. Now, a lot of people do look for, you know, dementia specific activities once they've had their diagnosis. And that doesn't always need to be the case. It has to be specific. Do you feel that there's been any barriers when you've looked for activities because of your diagnosis?
I suppose that there are barriers, but I think the barriers are more at the moment in my head. So I was a very nervous kid, and then grew out of it completely and was perfectly normal. Since I was diagnosed, my confidence levels have dropped somewhat. Just one of those, I know it's utterly irrational, but if it's not a door that I'm familiar with, I don't want to open it. And it's, you know, this part of my head saying, like, don't be stupid, you've opened a million doors, there's nothing different with this one. But I'm fully accepting that I'm not entirely rational at times anymore, and I just have to go with it. And occasionally I will walk away from where I was going to go because
do you feel this is a confidence thing then, Dave? It's just sort of having the confidence to feeling, you know, if you can get through those doors and you'll get somewhere to really enjoy yourself.
Yeah, it is literally just, I know it is the barriers in my head. And it's become easier now because I can regulate what I'm doing, where I'm going. I don't go out on a limb to put myself into a situation that I'm not particularly sure about.
And I know you said you spoke about the table tennis and you're playing on the Mondays, but I mean, it's opened up more doors for you, hasn't it? Just not playing on the Mondays mornings, because you play in the evenings in a league as well now, don't you?
Yes.
And that's a little bit different because it's not sort of the sort of same older people, as you say, sort of, you know, in a sort of centre in the morning. It's a little bit more exclusive, I suppose, with sort of, you know, younger, fitter people. And has there been any things sort of within those evening sessions that you felt that, you know, they've had to go out of their way to be more inclusive for you or adapted things?
Yes, they've been brilliant. It is very similar to the daytime club in terms of the age range is actually bigger in that group than the other one, which was a shock. But I was desperate to play competitively again, and it took me a while to actually say I want to play, but I can only play if somebody else will score. And within sort of table tennis circles, you all score. It's the unwritten rule that you don't dob it off to somebody else and not take your turn. And I sort of said it to them, and yeah, it was great. They just said, "Yeah, not a problem. You know, we'll cover it." And the longer I've played, some of the regulars that we play against, normally it's the home team will do most of the scoring, but they're quite happy that if it's my turn, quite often one of the opposition will score it instead, which makes my evening so much better. Yeah. You know, because if there was a hint that I might have to score, I wouldn't turn up. You know, I'd cry off. So you know, it's kept it there for me. Sorry.
And that's brilliant, isn't it? I mean, it is brilliant that, you know, it may be a big thing, you know, the scoring for, and obviously it's vital for the match to be played, but for that, those adaptations to be made for you has made it a much more enjoyable evening for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's become, you know, probably the highlight of what I do, because I love playing friendly table tennis with friends and people, you know, of different ages. But I want to play competitively if I can. So, hopefully I've got another 10, 15 years of it. If I can still be playing when I'm sort of 70, I'll still be relatively young compared to some of them.
Brilliant. What a lovely legacy for your dad as well. I'm sure he's looking down and really proud of you playing table tennis.
No, he'll be still there saying, "No, you shouldn't be doing it like that." Yeah.
Fantastic. Dave, have you got any other advice for anybody listening today about hobbies, taking up new hobbies, continuing with their hobbies?
Yeah, it's just be brave. Don't back away. I know I've missed a few opportunities to do things that, with hindsight, I know I could have done. But the majority of the time, I've said, I want to do this, but I can't do everything that you would normally expect. Very rarely does it actually cause an issue, and if it did, frankly, I wouldn't want to be there anyway. There are an awful lot of people who are very generous and understand that I have slightly different needs to what they expect when they look at me. And those that can't accept it, tough, that's their problem. But, as long as possible, I say to keep doing what you want to do. And the majority of the time, you're gonna get positive things out of it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dave, for sharing your passion for table tennis with us. Dave will be on the Q&A panel today. So if you have some questions or just want some advice from Dave, please put your questions in the Q&A box and we'll be more than happy to answer them. Thank you once again, Dave. Thank you.
Pleasure.
I think that's a remarkable story. My takeaway from that is the 5 things that have to be done today and the 5 things it would be good to do today. I think that's quite a handy thing for all of us, maybe. And I think that what you told there was a story that as a person with a diagnosis, you can go out. Sometimes it's a question of going to things which have been specifically arranged and designed for somebody with a diagnosis of dementia. But there's plenty of things out there that are available. And, when you said, well, your message to everybody is just be brave. It's a huge knock to your confidence, obviously, to have that diagnosis. And particularly for people who've been functioning in a demanding work environment, suddenly to have all that stripped away. But to develop and show that confidence and to realize that people are willing to be supportive and helpful and to have done as well as you've done is absolutely amazing. So really, thanks a lot for sharing the story. And as Nikki said, if people have got questions for Dave, please raise them in the Q&A box. We're moving on now to the final conversation of the afternoon. And I'd like to introduce Roberta. And Roberta Mazur works in a professional capacity now for the organisation Arts for Dementia. And in the course of our conversation, which took place last week, she'll tell a little bit more about that, but also the personal side of her story, which is of a daughter supporting a dad who had a diagnosis of dementia and her mum too. So thanks very much. And let's introduce Roberta. Thank you. I'd like to really welcome you this afternoon, Roberta, to the meeting of the Young Onset Alzheimer's Support Group. And we're very happy to have you here because you've got a unique experience that you bring, your own personal experience of living with a family member with dementia and engaging in some very interesting activities, which I hope you're going to talk to us about in a moment. And then you've carried on that interest and the learning that you've acquired in that context into your professional role now. So can we start with you just sort of telling us a little bit about your father and what you did to support him during his dementia journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So firstly, thanks for having me here, Jackie. It's lovely to be able to speak on the topic. My wonderful late father, Bob, He was diagnosed with frontal temporal dementia, and the experience we had, as many do, it was obviously quite a challenge to overcome sort of communication issues and a huge change in lifestyle. I supported him in a way as a carer, so much so with my sister and my mother. And we, as quite a creative family in a way, and with my background, I used to run a gallery in Australia. I tried to encourage sort of the creative arts as a sort of different expression for him to be doing something different and enjoyable as a family. It's actually something he had never really been interested in. My sister and I were the sort of creative ones in the family. My dad was an engineer, so it's something he'd never ever done before. But we came across Arts for Dementia, and there was a wonderful program called Clay for Dementia, which was taking place at the Garden Museum in Lambeth. And again, something he'd never done before, never worked with clay, but we sort of gently encouraged him to go along, and myself and my mother went as well. And it was quite extraordinary, really, what came out of that, because he was firstly sort of very reluctant to do anything that he, in his eyes, wasn't meaningful. So he created a teapot and designed a teapot out of clay, which in his eyes was a practical way of working with the medium.
Was that the engineer in him coming out?
Yes, exactly. So he thought, right, how can I make this subject matter that I've never done before slightly more interesting to me, because it was something he was originally a little bit reluctant to do. The group there, we really connected with. There was a lot of people in a similar situation to us. Some younger members of the group. My father was in his 60s, and so it was quite nice for my mother, myself, and our family to sort of be with people who were experiencing maybe something we were at the same time, and a sort of a free space where you didn't have to be sort of concerned or worried about any problematic symptoms or nerves at doing something new. It was a very welcoming space, and the people there really changed our perspective on many things. So we made friends and were able to sort of create and learn new things, which I think was the most interesting thing that came out of it for me, which was, yeah.
Did you participate in the activities as well?
I did, yes. So the whole idea, I think, behind it was that carers or loved ones or companions or whoever it may be are able to engage creatively, all together. So being able to go to a group that's out of your daily routine, it's something that you're not, going to something enjoyable together. To create together. There are a lot of groups I've found that, it will be just the person with dementia that is sort of there, and then the carer may or companion may go off for a little while. And I suppose there are pros and cons with that as well, of maybe companions having a little bit of time away and respite, but also people with dementia having that sort of experience independently. But I think there's a joy to doing something together that is fun. And, my father and I created things together. We worked on, after he'd done his teapot, he sort of got a little bit more into the creative free expression side of things. And we created a piece where our hands were, he cut a piece of his, did a clay hand of his, and I did a clay hand of mine, and we sort of formed them together. And we created this quite interesting piece, and they are things that I treasure and will have forever.
That must be very, very precious now to still have that, to have his hand in the clay. I think it's really interesting what you're talking about there. That sort of, I think, as a carer or person with dementia, that sort of going along as though it's to an appointment and sort of things get done to the person with dementia, that going along and just doing something together where you're sort of as equals in the relationship with each other and with the rest of the group. is such a lovely thing to happen, isn't it? And that to be learning alongside each other.
Learning alongside each other, learning new skills alongside each other. And as you say, getting away from the sort of more mundane things and the more, the things that you may have to do, that you don't necessarily want to be doing, just going to do something fun once a week that is, something that helps you escape your daily routine. And you create
I think the other thing that you picked up on there was that idea of going to that workshop. And I mean, I've been there, and it's a lovely environment at the Garden Museum, isn't it? Felt a privilege to be there.
Yeah.
But that sort of sense of a shared space where you're there on equal terms with everybody else in the group.
Absolutely. I think, there can be worries not only for the person with dementia, but obviously their companions and carers as well, that, some of the things you may have done previously, you may feel that not so comfortable, to go to an art class or a dance class or a music class or whatever that may be, because of maybe symptoms that you might be feeling or, might be aware of in your loved one. So it's really wonderful to be able to go to a space where there's other people who understand, and you can feel more comfortable and free in terms of your experiences.
What about the people who facilitated the session? Because they were sort of very skilled, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we had, so the ceramicist Katie Spragg was actually the facilitator of the programme, which was really incredible. If anyone is based in London or has a trip to London and would go to the Garden Museum, her pieces are actually there on display, and she does these really beautiful, very fine ceramic work, really, really fine blades of grass made out of ceramic or little tiny beautiful flowers. So her work is very delicate, very interesting, and her experience as a professional artist, she was able to sort of pass on some really interesting knowledge to the group and get us working in a way that you felt challenged and inspired by creating with someone like that. It was not a group where we were just making lumps of different things or it was challenging arts activity to really get us thinking, to get us learning new skills, and that was different week to week as well. So you were working on pieces and techniques that developed your skills over the course of the programme, which was great.
I noticed on the occasion when I was lucky enough to be able to visit that the quality of what was going on, and that it was challenging for everybody, wasn't it? And
yes,
just to have that sort of, to have the session be facilitated by an artist who's a very high caliber in her own right, was a really special experience, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also the skill levels for the group, it was quite varied. There was and that was also quite open as well and relaxed. So there's some weeks where my father might not wanted to have done exactly what was on the agenda that day, and he decided to create his own thing. And then there would be other people really getting their teeth into the techniques that Katie Spragg was delivering. So it was quite interesting to have the instruction be the same for all, but the creative expression being so different at the end, and how the group came together to be really interested in what everyone else was doing as well. And it culminated actually in an exhibition at the Garden Museum, which was really fantastic. So to be able to see everyone's work on display was really, really fascinating.
And it was that led you, I mean, maybe you should move on and think a little bit more about your broader role now in Arts for Dementia. And not everybody joining us this afternoon will be aware of the role of Arts for Dementia. Could you tell us a little bit about that? And about the opportunities that it offers nationally, as it's not just a London-based organisation.
That's right. Yeah. So obviously following on from my meeting Arts for Dementia at the Garden Museum, when I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to join the team at the beginning of 2020, just before the lockdown. So obviously things have transformed to virtual offering as well, which I can explain in a bit more detail. But Arts for Dementia, we're a charity that deliver and champion all of the arts as a sort of effective tool for health and well-being for people with dementia. We offer workshops that we deliver in partnership with arts organisations across art forms. So we've worked with people like the Royal Opera House to do sort of a ballet programme. We've worked with, the National Poetry Library. We've worked with different music and painting and all sorts of different art forms and different organisations. So delivery of the workshops is something that we do. We also train arts facilitators in early stage dementia awareness so that they can form their own workshops for people in the community. And we also signpost and promote other arts organisations and other arts facilitators to promote the work they're doing in the community around the UK. So that's on our website. So people who may want to find some engaging arts opportunities in their particular area, they can go to our website, and we promote different arts engagement workshops that are happening in different areas across the UK. Yeah.
One thing I recall in the period after my husband's diagnosis was that he was very unwilling, really, to sort of join in very much in activities which sort of had a label of dementia on them.
Sure, yes. Because I can relate to that.
Because it was a club he really didn't want to be in.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about that, in terms of the range of things that Arts for Dementia is engaged in?
Yeah.
About sort of overcoming that reluctance to engage.
Well, my dad was very much the same with, as you say, not wanting to be part of that club. And we kind of encouraged him in a way that we wanted to go, as it was open to carers and companions. So it was sort of, especially when something's happening at such an exciting venue, or, the Garden Museum, I think was very appealing to my mum and dad's interest in terms of they both liked gardening. So my mum was sort of, come on, let's go to that. And, it's not just for people with dementia, there's people with memory issues, or there's people, there's all sorts of people there. And, because a lot of, groups are promoted to not just people with dementia, but people with mild cognitive impairment, or, it might be arts for brain health, or there's different sort of terminologies that, now that, people are aware that creativity can be really wonderful for all sorts of brain issues. So it was very much so we encouraged him by us wanting to do it and us wanting to engage. And I think he certainly came along at the beginning because of our excitement of wanting to do it. And then by the end, he'd enjoyed himself, thankfully. So
I think that's a really tremendously positive point to take away from this conversation. I think that, that sense of sort of mutual enjoyment and interest in something that some of these activities take people, give you access to places that you would otherwise not be able to go to, that you meet with artists and creators that you might not otherwise. And so, very often that not just for the person with the diagnosis, but for family carers as well.
Yeah.
There's huge, opportunities for learning and just sort of enjoying something without
a
lot of some of the stresses and strains.
Very much so. Getting it's on both sides. It's people are it's extraordinarily difficult experience, and to be a companion or care and be able to go to some of these venues and experience and create and enjoy yourself. That's mainly what we're all about. It's the positive things of what you still can achieve, because creative skills can remain strong for years after the onset of symptoms, and to be able to tap into the creative part of the brain, learn how to do something new, I think is something really powerful for people at any stage in their life, dementia or not. So it's we're very much championing the positive aspects of what can still be learnt and what can still be enjoyed.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Roberta, for talking to us about your own experience and the range of things that are out there and available to lots of people in our support group. So thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you, Jacquie.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Jacquie, and Roberta, and for all of our other speakers today. If I could now welcome onto the screen everyone who's on the panel, that'd be great. And we have a few minutes left to discuss a few of the questions that have come in and a few reflections on what have been, I'm sure you'll agree, a wonderful set of talks. So without further ado from me, perhaps I'll dive straight in, if I may, with a quick question for Cath about trials. Someone who's joining us and watching has asked, how do we go about getting my husband considered for trials? And in general, how can people register for clinical trials?
Thanks, Seb. Yes, and I hope that people could see my response in the Q&A, because I've put in an email link, which is effectively, if anybody that's interested wants to find out more about trials, find out if they are suitable, whether it's something that they would want to do, there is a link there, and I can put it again. We can put it afterwards, actually, send it around to people. But essentially, it's drctrialinquiries@ucl.ac.uk. But if anybody just gets in contact with the RDS team, they can always put them in touch with our recruitment team if that's something that people want. And what would happen is we would then just have a chat about what they were interested in, what they did and didn't want to do, very importantly, and their level of involvement that they would like, and go through what's available. And then it's up to the individual and their family to decide what they would like to find out more about. And they can do that as quickly or slowly as they like. It's an ongoing conversation.
Great, thank you, Cath. And a follow-up question that came in just while we've got you was about the commitment involved in trials. As you've said, there are different trials involved in very different things. Could you just paint a brief picture, though, I guess, about the range of commitments? And I suppose people are probably thinking not just about the kind of practicalities, like, do I have to swallow that pill or take that brain scan, but I guess perhaps the more emotional and as well as practical elements of commitment to it.
Yeah, and I think your latter comment there, Seb, is really important, and the discussion I know we've had a lot. I mean, from the practical point of view, there's a huge range. You can take a tablet or you can have an infusion, and those things might be once a day if it's a tablet, they might be once a month or once every 3 months if it's an injection. For some of those things, you need to come in every month to the site. For others, you can do it remotely, at least for some of those visits, so it's a much less onerous traveling task. We try and make things as flexible as possible for people, so that, especially of working age, we want to make it that they minimize the impact on the rest of their life. So we aim to help support them through things. We also have psychological support for people that are in trials. That's because going into a trial is a big commitment, and there's some positives from it, which are that you're very much part of a family, part of a team, and the essential part of that team, both you and your partner in the trial. And so we work as a team together, and we build a relationship and effectively a family within each trial of the participants and the staff. And that's a very positive thing that people find in general. But of course, if you have to go through cognitive tests, that can be a challenge. It can be upsetting to be confronted by what you'd rather not face at times, or it might be at times when you'd rather do it another time. So firstly, we try and take that into account. But secondly, we try and give people the tools to be able to do that in an empathetic environment, and to be able to say, no, I don't want to do that now, I'll do it a different time. So there are various things we try and help support people with in the process of a trial.
Thank you. That's really, really helpful, Cath. And I think that sense of it being a team environment rather than you being a guinea pig being observed by a bunch of sort of clinical professionals is really important. And I think it's such a helpful thing to underline. And also, I was thinking, Caroline, if I may come to you next for the next question, it also seems to sort of chime with the kind of environment that you and Hermione were describing, about very much that sort of team family ethos to creating meaning and understanding within your own program. A particular question that came in for you, one very practical question, was about how do people get to take part in something like you're describing at Wigmore Hall, but also a separate question was also about, for you personally, about what you've learned from working with people with young onset Alzheimer's disease, and whether there have been any particular differences of working especially with younger people with dementia as opposed to perhaps older people with dementia.
Yeah, well, the practical question, if you want to get involved in the project, the one we're talking about is called Out of the Ordinary, and we're working in partnership with Rare Dementia Support. So you could get directly in touch with Nikki. I hope that's right. Is it Nikki? Or you can mark your email to our program manager, Lydia Nichols at Wigmore Hall, if you're interested in that project, and we would absolutely love to see you. I mean, I think that's right what you've picked up, Seb. It's of great meaning to us as well. We're doing something together, and that feeling of being part of something where your own experience is echoed, dignified, respected, valued by other people, and that they may then take it into all manner of different directions that you might not have thought of, and turn it into music or art or poetry that we make together, and we might then play around with photographs, images, objects. Things might remind you of other things. I mean, I think this work has been incredibly rewarding to me. I think specifically, I'd say that working with people who have a young onset diagnosis is incredibly powerful, because they might have a great amount of energy to engage in something new alongside the shock of a diagnosis, and the possibility to do something that they might not have done before, which makes everything look so very different. You remain the person that you are, and those things continue to be as you make them. And I think that has been incredibly inspirational for me, as well as for anybody who might be part of those projects. I think we're learning all the time from each other, and that has given a really rich quality to that work that makes it possible for each other to give something, whoever we are, whether we're leading or whether we're taking part or whether we're living with somebody and loving somebody who's living with the diagnosis of dementia, that we all do the thing together.
Thank you, that's really helpful. And I liked what you were saying there about, or again, emphasizing the stepping out into something new has been quite a challenge, and that sort of tags in with some of the praise that's come in for you, Dave, about your talk. One person in particular said, "Thank you so much, Dave, for a fantastic talk. I loved what you said about being brave." And
Me too.
And their question to you, Dave, was, what would you say helps you to feel brave?
Oof, that's a tough one. It's just weighing up how much do you want something and how much you're prepared to give, whether it's mentally, physically, to actually achieve that. And you know, that's a balance that you've got to, only you can make that decision. There have been things that I've really wanted to, but when I've got to the situation, even though I really did want to do it, it wasn't worth the mental stress, anxiety, whatever it might be, to actually do it. And quite often that's only comes to a decision point, possibly very close to the actual event. You know, it's great leading up to thinking, oh yeah, it'll be fine. But when you're actually getting close to it and you've got to say yay or nay, then I think it's really, unless it's something that has real value in another sense, that you'll get something physical, or I would go with my gut, and if I don't think it's worth it, it's apply. No, I don't think the benefits for me personally are worth the pain, the stress that will come from doing it. So the odd thing with that, though, is obviously I could get the same opportunity 2 weeks running. I might decline it the first week, and the second week feel, yeah, I can do that. And that's probably a pain for people on the other side, but that's the way it's got to be.
Not a pain at all. It sounds very human to me. I suspect everyone on the screen can relate to that sense of being able to do things on some occasions but not others. Jacquie, did you want to?
I just want to say, I just think that point that Dave's made is so important, that, you know, I'm thinking about it, you know, from the carer's perspective now, you know, that just because somebody doesn't want to do it today doesn't mean that they won't want to do it tomorrow when they're in a different mood or feel different. So be brave and don't give up, you know, for the carer or whoever's supporting the person. I think it's, I think that's really, really important point to make.
Can I just add as well, Seb, that I mean, Dave comes to our peer support group, which is fantastic, but I've never met such wonderful people who give each other the support and confidence to go out and try new things. The discussion, it's always very lightly facilitated because they are just full of ideas. And what are you doing? Oh, I think I might try that. Yeah, you really must. And really do encourage each other. And it's just so fantastic every month to hear their stories of what they've been doing and what new things they've been trying. It makes me feel a bit sad about my own sort of social life, actually. And perhaps that I should possibly be out there doing more exciting things.
Great, thank you. And one other thing, just Dave, while we're with you, is that I think, I'm sure I wasn't anyone to pick up on, was interested in hearing you say that sometimes you think the barriers are in your own head, but then going on to give that really nice example of how things like the table tennis matches, one of the barriers is nothing to do anything with your head. It's the expectation that you'll score for yourself, something I would have been oblivious to. So it's really helpful to hear about those kind of hidden barriers that are out there in a whole variety of different situations. Not necessarily because people are being mean or thoughtless, but it's just like a tradition that you score yourself. So it's such a helpful example of the little tweaks and adaptations that can be so helpful and might make the difference between you feeling like you can go or feeling like you want to stay away.
Yeah, and it must occur in lots of different, all avenues of what we do, but it can just be such a tiny little thing that somebody needs to do. You know, the other thing for me would be you go somewhere, and where are the facilities? And quite often, you know, I'm not desperately comfortable asking that because I'm worried that I'm going to get an answer, and then by the time I've gone to go wherever it is, if it's any distance away, I'll have forgotten. You know, I can't be alone in having that anxiety of going to it. And then, you know, I've asked you this question, you've given me a really good, sensible, easy answer, but 30 yards round the corner and 2 more bends, I don't know whether they're going left, right, or straight ahead again. And, you know, there's possibly something in the design of shopping arcades and things that could be taken care of, but a wide question.
Indeed. Thank you, Dave. Cath, sorry, I think you wanted to come in.
I was just very, very briefly, I think Dave makes such an important point. I've had that same point made by 2 golfers recently in my clinic who both stopped playing golf because they had to score each other and they felt embarrassed and that they didn't want to say to other people, I can't do it, because they were mildly affected. And we worked out a solution, like Dave worked out a solution. They've gone back to golf. But, you know, I think it's the little things that really matter, actually.
Thank you. So we talked there a little bit about the barriers that we might put up or that might be intentionally or unintentionally put up around this. And that relates a little bit to a question that came in, Roberta, for you and possibly for Caroline a bit as well, about encouraging people when one's trying to provide an appropriate sort of adapted opportunity for people. And maybe Jacquie has comments on this too, about how do you draw that line between whether you're encouraging someone to do something or try something new, or whether you're being pushy? I don't know how you found that, either personally or through your wider work.
Yeah, I don't know who wants to take that, but I guess it's, you know, inspiring, you know, people with something new. I guess it's people are always hesitant to try something new. Everybody is, and I think it's just explaining what's on offer, finding maybe some personal things that may interest someone with the particular activity that you're doing. So we'll kind of speak to people beforehand about interests they may have that's not related at all to the activity, and try and kind of integrate that into what we're doing. Speak to the facilitators who might be able to kind of integrate some kind of personal level, person-centered care things that are happening in that activity. But coming to even just to one session, just coming to try one thing out, and then we often find that people who were reluctant to come to things at all come to one and then find something they love about it within it, and you can kind of cater it to the individual. But yeah, it's a really tricky one to encourage people to come and do something new across, no matter what you're doing. But I don't know, Caroline may have some other things that they maybe do. You certainly don't want to ever push someone into doing something they don't want to do, but enthusiasm and something exciting in terms of what you're delivering, I think, get the message across.
Yeah, I think maybe the feeling of everything that you put out about it will encourage people to think if they like to be traveling that way with you or not. And that's fair enough, isn't it? Everything won't be for everyone. Some people will like the look of some things, and some people will like the look of something different. I think one of the things that we've found that's really good is that having it be a series of things gives a possibility that people can kind of warm into it, which is very much in the nature of what we're doing here for certain. But I think perhaps probably Roberta and Jacquie, you'd agree that something that's a one-off is often needing to provide in a slightly different way to something which provides and builds a community of people engaging together.
I mean, I think in the experience that I had of living with dementia alongside Tony, and the researchers have known more about this, that as the logical part of his brain and all the sort of the reasoning and the world of facts that he'd lived in, as those things became more slippery, that the expressive side of his personality emerged in a way that I'd never seen before. And so there was a point right at the start when we were going to the sessions at the Royal Academy when there was a suggestion that he might draw, and he said, no, I can't do that. But then he actually started doing it, and he got to the point when we went to the Manet exhibition at the Tate, and my mum said to Tony, would you like to, if you could take one of these paintings home, which one would you choose? And he said, none of them. And she said, why? And he said, because I can do better myself. So he'd sort of gone in a year from being somebody who didn't draw to somebody who rated himself slightly above Manet. So and I just thought that was brilliant, and that he actually had a self-image of himself as an artist.
I think that's something that I would absolutely agree with you, Jacquie, and emphasize too that being artistic and creative is a human need. I mean, maybe you have to look at why we don't think that most of the time, and why we need to wait until there's a problem before we start to think to ourselves, this is something that I really love doing. I imagine that nobody will need to facilitate work eventually, because we'll all realize how creative and expressive we can be and find the ways that we love to do that. So sorry, I cut across you.
Thank you all. Sorry, just mindful of time. Before I hand back to Jacquie and Cath to close, I'm just going to hand over to Nikki for a final comment just on that question, because I guess enabling people to discover something new and essentially empowering and enabling people to find solutions and to focus more on what people can do and not so much on what can't be done is such a key element of all of the support work that you deliver and manage. Nikki, I wondered if you had any comments on that.
Yeah, very much so, and it's looking at ability and adaptation basically. So you're constantly sort of looking to see if there's activities or even chores and things people can still do them, and they've got the ability to do them and not sort of raise it too high, but adapt it so it's much more enjoyable. It's a bit like sort of Cath was talking about golf, maybe play sort of 9 holes rather than 18 if you're sort of struggling to get around. It is sort of changing the way you do things, but also it's actually changing the person who's there as well doing it with them. I was talking to a gentleman the other day, and he tried such a long time with his wife to take her to go and do sort of art activities and to music, and she was always very adamant, no, we're not doing this. And they've recently, you know, got some care in, they've got a personal assistant in to help them, and you know, same place, same activities, she absolutely loves it, she really does. So it can just sometimes be a change of person to help accommodate with activities.
Great, thank you so much, Nikki, and to all of you on the panel for answering those questions that have come in. And I will hand back to Jacquie and Cath just to close the meeting.
Well, thanks to everybody for what's been a really interesting and varied session. I think that the contributions that we've had from Dave and from Caroline and Hermione and Roberta have been really inspiring in all sorts of ways. I'm really grateful to you for taking time to join us this afternoon. Thanks go to the RDS team for the support in pulling all this together in their usual efficient kind of way. And a reminder that there'll be a follow-up email with all the links that you need to follow up on some of the things that we've been talking about this afternoon. Our next virtual meeting is on June the 17th, and we'll be sending information about that around ahead of the date. And then for the first time first time ever, we're going to be meeting in person in London in October. And so we're looking forward to that as well. So, Cath, is there anything that you want to add at this time?
I think you've said it all beautifully, Jacquie, and specifically about seeing everybody in person in October. That's really exciting. Maybe we can have some form of one of these things that we've been talking about there. That would be wonderful.
No, that would be brilliant. Okay, so thank you very much indeed for taking time to join us this afternoon. All of those who've been following us out there in Zoom land. Look forward to seeing you next time. Hope it's been interesting and helpful. And as ever, we're signing off now, and there'll be a short video from the National Brain Appeal to finish off the session this afternoon. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Hello, my name is Eva Tate, and I'm the Major Appeals Manager and Manager of the Rare Dementia Support Fund held by the charity The National Brain Appeal. The National Brain Appeal raises money as the dedicated charity for the National Hospital for Neurology and Neurosurgery and UCL Queen's Square Institute of Neurology. The National Brain Appeal raises funds for Rare Dementia supports 2,000 members to help individuals living with rare and early onset forms of dementia, their families, friends, and healthcare professionals. And we also hold several other funds for FTD and dementia research. The funding helps not only the support group meetings in London, but also the regional support groups, admin and support staff, and all other associated expenses, including the new online support groups. When things return to normal, there are travel and accommodation bursaries available to help members attend the meetings. This year, we've raised our fundraising target to 300,000, and this will rise further to 350,000 by 2022 to develop and extend the service in the areas of education, support, and research, with the ultimate aim that everyone affected by a form of rare dementia will have access to specialist information and support, as well as contact with other people with a similar condition. We apply for grants from grant-making trusts, foundations, and livery companies, and have a wonderful group of supporters, some of whom are here today, who fundraise for us in an amazing variety of ways. We would love it if you would like to sign up to our RDS fundraising newsletter to hear more of these stories and receive news of how we can support this community. We have had people do head shaves for us. We have had a gentleman drive across the Mongolian steppe in a VW Polo, and we have lots of people who take part in runs and virtual runs as well. At the end of February, we held a gala dinner called Mission Possible, where we raised 110,000 for the expansion of rare dementia support. And we are delighted to announce that in line with this expansion, the charity is committed to raise up to 7 million to create the world's first centre of excellence for rare dementias. If anyone would like to discuss any fundraising ideas or the new capital appeal, please do feel free to email me or my colleague Alexis, our Senior Fundraising Manager, who will speak about the innovative new ways you can be involved in fundraising for RDS, even during this challenging time. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Alexis Gebby and I'm the Senior Fundraising Officer at the National Brain Appeal. I just want to start off by saying a huge thank you to all of you who already fundraise for RDS. We really appreciate all of your incredible efforts, especially at this difficult time. My role at the National Brain Appeal is to look after all the amazing people taking on various fundraising activities for us. We have had people challenging themselves to run marathons, cycle long distances, climb mountains, and even take on skydives, all whilst raising money for RDS. We also have wonderful fundraisers out in the community who organise golf days, hold coffee mornings, host choir and carol concerts, and even shave their heads. These people ensure that more people like you can be supported through rare dementia support. If you're interested in becoming one of our fundraising heroes, then please do contact me. I am here to support you with your fundraising, and I'm more than happy to chat about any ideas that you may have. While at the moment it isn't possible to take part in a sporting challenge or hold a big fundraising gathering in your local community, we do have some fundraising ideas, such as taking on a solo virtual run or walk, hosting a quiz for your friends or family online, asking for birthday donations in lieu of going out, or even donating money that you may be saving by not travelling to work or buying your daily coffee. Do get in touch with me if you would like to get involved. In the meantime, take care and we hope to see you soon.